All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's tournament strategy show where we are going to look at last night's slate, see what went well, see what could use some work. Then we'll look at today's slate and just kind of game plan it and talk through guys I like, guys I don't like as much, touch on injury news, all of the usual good stuff. Yeah, let's jump right into it. What's up? Pure Whip says, hello, Bob. How do we build proper lineups for 150 max versus 20 max? I'll be honest with you. I'm fine tuning my 20 max strategy again. Still, it's getting closer. I used to be a 20 max guy. I took down my first 100K with 20 lines, but I'm still working on that craft. 150, I still have down pretty packed. I've taken down the mini a few times already this year. I go more into the weeds on the pre-lock show with just what I'm doing. I don't always tell people to copy exactly what I do, but I just show what I do. But for me, 150 max, I use a lot of mins where I force in low owned players. And if I'm not seeing them in the domination station, I'll make players show up that I want to see. And we talk about a lot of those guys on this show. And then 20 max, same thing, but a little bit less. You're right. B-Dubs has a 20 max process that works. I don't know if he's taken down the 20 max contest actually, but I do know he has a process. Tattoo, what's up, man? Thomas, hope you're doing well. Let's go. But not to slack on B-Dubs. That guy's great. He's taken down multiple contests this season, made a lot of money, got third in the 100K. I think he won like 20K. So that was no shade. As far as uniques, random exposures, both Brandon and I don't use any of those. We only use one unique. Randomization stays at 0. Exposures are what we force, mins and maxes, but that just depends on the slate. So definitely do tune into the pre-lock show. Brandon won't be able to make it today, but we'll both be on. Well, I'll be on today. He'll be on Friday for sure. He might be able to make a surprise appearance. All right, let's look at last night. So first, I gotta give my guy Cinematic a shout out. Won, what is that? 8K last night. Great job to him. Glad you did well. Then my guy JJ, what's up? Had a great night in tiers, and he was profitable in the mini max. Put 460 in, won $1,700. He did great. And then I believe this is the 100K winning lineup. Sometimes this site hasn't been as consistent as of lately, where it looks like SGA made it in there. Derek White was someone I liked a lot yesterday, so had plenty of exposure to him. Josh Hart, I did not see that game coming at all. I pretty much faded that first game. Was a blowout. He was super low owned, but to take down the 100K, you did need Josh Hart. Gordon Hayward was a core play. So this was a little interesting last night. We got the news. We talked about it on the pre-lock show. Was hoping Cason Wallace was going to start. If Cason Wallace started, he was going to be a core play. But then right after lock, we got the news that actually Gordon Hayward was going to start, which looking back at it does make a lot of sense. They just didn't do that on Sunday. And so I late swapped and got Gordon Hayward in there and got Cason Wallace out of there. And so I think that helped me a lot because Gordon Hayward wasn't that chalky last night because a lot of people just didn't make that switch. And so that went well. Luke Cornett, everyone was playing once we got the news that all of the Celtics bigs were going to be out. Fred VanVleet was a core play for me, I believe. If he wasn't a core play, then he was someone that we were significantly over the field on. Sam Hauser was similar situation to Fred VanVleet, significantly over the field. Trey Jones, I didn't have any exposure to. So last night was profitable, not by much, nothing to brag about, but I was really missing those low-owned plays that I usually... Yeah, I was just not on those low-owned plays like Hart and Jones that gave me like a top play or a top line, which is unfortunate, but you got to take the profitable nights when you can. So looking at today's slate, we have an interesting one. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. And we'll start off with the Nets going up against the Magic. You'll realize that there are 2 very low total games on this slate, and I'm not completely avoiding them, which is a little bit out of character for me, but we'll see. Yeah, you can DM beat up. You can talk to everybody, Tattoo. You know how it works. Everybody, we're DFS Army. We use the Discord a lot. So if you're not in the Discord, you need to go on our website, follow the instructions to get in there, because that's really where a lot of the magic happens. Anyway, let's get back on topic here. For the Nets, going up against The Orlando Magic tonight, pretty healthy. Cam Johnson's playing. That does make me a lot less interested in other potential players you could look at. In the sim model, Cam Thomas does stand out a little bit. Ultimately, I was between Bridges and or Cam Thomas. I don't like to overly invest in low total games. I think those are really the two viable options. They're both pretty cheap at 6,900. They're not very consistent players, and so that's why they're that cheap. But the upside's there. I lean towards Bridges, but I do think you can completely fade this game. As of right now, Bridges, if the slate was to happen right now, I would put a 5% minimum on him just to be around field weight if he did go off. But the matchup against the Magic is pretty tough. This team has been pretty solid defensively. They play at a very slow pace. Boring basketball, but it's been working for them. So not a team I'm overly excited about. I would really only consider Bridges and Cam Thomas. For now, I'm looking at Bridges as someone I want to force exposure to, but the more I think about it, I'm close to just talking myself out of it. But for now, I like them. And then on the other side of things, the Magic are healthy. Suggs was not on the injury report. Fultz was also not on the injury report. And I don't get overly excited about this team from a DFS standpoint unless they're in a really soft matchup and or there's guys out and we have injury news. We have none of the above here. The matchup against the Nets, again, is never one that I'm afraid of. They're just pretty neutral across the board. Their front court is pretty stout from a defensive perspective. So that makes guys like Paolo less interesting to me. Guys like Wendell Carter Jr. are a lot less interesting to me. If you want to take a shot, I would lean towards Franz, but he's not on my Franz Wagner. He's not on my radar for now either. Just not a game I love. Not the best game environment here. All right, let's see. Oh, whoa. A lot of comments. Yeah, Micromax Day. Good luck to everyone who's playing in that. The good thing about the Micromax today, I'm not playing in it, but they did lower the amount of entrants. For the last few games, it's been 100K plus in that contest. Today, I think it was like, 82 to 86. They almost got me. I was tempted to take a shot on it, but I've been doing a lot with sports betting and stuff like that too, so I don't like to overinvest. I've made a lot of money from DFS, and my goal is to just invest into some of the businesses and other stuff that I do. And I play DFS for fun now and still make a lot of money or decent money from that too. So yeah, Tattoo, you were right. Your Magic is in the NHL Discord and hopefully you'll have more here soon. Jay, what's up, everybody? Do we get NHL lives? Not currently, but maybe one day. Tattoo, you're already great, man. Let's chill. All right. So for the Raptors going up against the Pistons, this is the next game. For the Raptors tonight, they were missing quite a few guys last night. They might still miss quite a few guys today. Emmanuel Quickley is listed as questionable. Gary Trent Jr. is questionable. These are two huge pieces of news for us. We saw what happened last time when these guys were out. We had to consider guys like Grady Dick, Bruce Brown. These type of plays are just so much more viable when both Quickley and Trent are out. RJ Barrett has already been ruled out, so that's nice to see. But I think more likely than not, I'm expecting Quickley and or Trent to play, so I'm not getting overly excited about going back to Dick here. So for the guys that I am planning on forcing exposure to, these aren't sneaky plays by any means, but there is a chance their ownership might be a little lower since they're questionable right now, but people have gotten sharper over the last few years. That doesn't happen as often as it used to. But Emmanuel Quickley, great spot, great matchup against the Pistons. Tied for the highest game total on the slate. You guys know me. I'm going to force exposure to this game. Emmanuel Quickley is going to be a priority for me if he plays and we don't get any news of a minutes restriction. Same story with Gary Trent Jr. Kelly O is the lucky center that gets to go up against the awful front court for Detroit. And so he's someone else that I'm going to look to prioritize at low ownership. He's a potential leverage play for me tonight. Someone that I'm looking to be possibly double the field on. So I like the Raptors a lot tonight. Bruce Brown is super chalky. He's my, just like last night with Lou Dort, even though I don't love Bruce Brown, I'm going to allow him to show up in my lines still, just because this is the highest total game environment. And so that's something I'm just going to have to live with. Right now, he's not showing up in too many of my lines, but I do expect him to show up a bit more later. He is looking super chalky. So at 31%, he's not someone I'm willing to force in if I don't get enough. Again, I'm saying that as if Quickly and Gary Trent play tonight. That changes dramatically if they end up getting ruled out. So yeah, I don't really love too many of the other pieces here. Not trying to go back to Freeman Liberty unless we get injury news and he ends up starting. But for now, the priorities are Quickly, Olynyk, and Gary Trent Jr., hoping they all play. And then for the Pistons, their favorite tonight, which is it's not something we get to say all too often, but they are also relatively healthy. We have Asar Thompson listed as questionable. Once again, we did this last time. If he gets ruled out and we see Fontecchio start, he becomes extremely viable. This is another spot where it's two bad defenses going up against each other. The Raptors and the Pistons are god awful defenses. The Raptors right now, ever since they've traded away a lot of their good players, they're just a team you make money by playing guys against. And so, especially their front court. Cade Cunningham at 8,600, still a little too cheap for me, so I want to prioritize him. That's not sneaky either. It looks like he's going to be pretty chalky, but he's someone that I will force exposure to if I'm not getting enough in the domination station naturally. Jalen Duren is another guy I like a lot. He's showing up in my early runs. Ivy, I'm fine with. He's just streaky. He burns you when you don't play him. He usually burns you when he's chalky. He is chalky today. He's just not going to be a priority for me, but he is a very viable play at 6,100, playing the minutes he plays in a relatively soft matchup. So I don't hate Ivy or anything like that. If he shows up, again, high total game, I'm fine with it. I'm just not so confident in him where I'm trying to force exposure. Not playing Asar if he plays tonight, unless he shows up naturally in the domination station. And then Fontecchio, I'm only playing if Asar gets ruled out. Also, Fontecchio, he is a little bit more expensive than he was last time out, but I'm still going to play him if Asar gets ruled out. That went well the other night with him as a core play in that situation, and it's an even softer matchup now. So more than willing to go back to it. All right, next up we have the Chicago Bulls going up against the Indiana Pacers. For the Bulls tonight, pretty healthy. Not really too much to talk about from an injury news standpoint. But what I like about them is that this is the third highest total game on the slate. Ignoring the ties. Like, there's the two games that are tied at 233, and then we have this game at 229. So we'll put it in third. I like this game. DeRozan is just someone I'm never overly excited about. Matchup is solid, though. He's getting some ownership, so he's not someone I'm looking to prioritize. If he showed up naturally, I'll be fine with that, but I'm just not forcing exposure to him as of right now. That could change, but I don't love this spot for him, and I don't love the price tag. Sim Model also didn't really like DeRozan too much either, so he's just not someone I plan on forcing exposure to. Similar story with Kobe White and Ayo and Caruso. Viable because Pacers played a relatively quick pace. Matchup isn't insanely difficult, but everyone seems priced appropriately here. I don't think we're getting a lot of value on anyone in this spot. We do know that the Pacers are giving up a lot of points to scoring wings like DeMar DeRozan, so the matchup is pretty soft. They're giving up the fourth most fantasy points allowed, actually. So that does make DeRozan viable. Again, I'm just prioritizing other players, but I don't think he's a dumb player or anything like that. Kobe White also has a pretty soft matchup here. We talked about it yesterday. Turner has been a pretty solid defender against centers this season. He hasn't given up too many points to bigs, but just like yesterday, when you have bigs that are above average, I'm okay playing them in tough matchups. Nikola Vucevic is one of those guys for me. I don't really care about the matchup as much as I care about the pace, and that to me is what usually increases Vucevic's upside. And so that's why he's someone that I want to at least match field weight on. I would be comfortable being a little bit over the field as well on him. Let's see. Anything else? Nope. That's the Bulls. I like him, but I'm really only prioritizing Vucevic there. Look at that. Tyrese Halliburton had a good night last night. Finally, came through a little bit. He could have done better. He slowed down towards the end of the game, which was disappointing. But he looks good while he's out there, which for me just means I'm going to continue to play him because he doesn't look bad. He still hasn't broken the slate and really exceeded his value the way we need him to. He just needs to have a complete game. But once again, as long as he plays tonight, one of the higher total game environments, and he's low owned, he will be a leverage play for me once again tonight. I know people are getting tired of it. They've been burned, but for me, I go back to guys who have upside, who are in good game environments, good spots that no one else is playing. That's how you take down tournaments. And so that's what I'm going to do with Halliburton and just go right back to him. Siakam proved me wrong last night. He wasn't in the Nuts lineup, but he definitely showed he still has a little bit of upside. With this being a good game environment, I don't hate Siakam, but I am always a little bit more hesitant to play bigs in back-to-backs. And I do know Siakam can do it. Matchup against DeRozan and crew, not overly tough these days. It's a pretty neutral matchup for him, close to slightly above average. But I get the Siakam play. Am I talking myself into it a little bit? It's just not on a back-to-back. If he's going to see 21% ownership, I just don't feel the need to do it. Let me double check the sim and make sure I'm not overlooking anything there. Yeah, he has a little bit of upside, but still not comparable to some other guys I like on this slate a bit more. So, yeah. Only guys I'm forcing in here, Tyrese Halliburton, 90% chance is going to be a leverage play for me today. Miles Turner, I do like the spot. I like the game environment. I like playing him in these fast-paced environments. Matchup against Vucevic, pretty neutral, so nothing plus, but I like playing bigs in fast-paced environments. More rebounds, more scoring, easier chance of getting in that double-double bonus, triple-double bonus, things of that sort. So I'm just going to try and match the field on him if I'm able to at 6,200. He's still not that expensive for the upside he brings to the table. That 40-point upside, which we would need once again tonight. Let me see. Yeah, so I like him. I'll match the field on him unless there's an obvious center play that's significantly better later due to injuries and things of that sort. Next up, we have the Nuggets going up against the Heat. This is another relatively low total game. Kanker's out, but there's not really too much injury news that matters here. I like the low ownership on the Nuggets tonight. The low game total is worrisome. The slow pace is also something to be nervous about, but we know these guys can be explosive. The game total's close, and especially if they can push the pace a little bit, I think there could be some sneaky upside in a spot like this. Jokic at 2% ownership is ridiculous. Matchup against Bam is tough. I never really cared too much about matchup. I do know he struggled a little bit against Bam just a couple of weeks ago. He only scored 47 fantasy points, but we see it all the time. Jokic can struggle in a tough matchup one game and then put up 80 to 90 points on them the next. So not a soft matchup. I don't expect him to do another 94-point performance like he had against the Raptors, but he's still someone I want some exposure to. I'll probably be close to double the field, at least like 5%, something like that. Nothing too crazy. Jamal Murray, matchup's pretty neutral. The only position the Heat are really locking down right now are bigs, centers. And again, Jokic, I don't care about matchups. Jamal Murray, pretty neutral spot, relatively low owned. Sim model liked him. A lot of the tools that I utilize the most point towards Jamal Murray being in a pretty good spot. And so I want to make sure I'm at least the field weight, ideally slightly above the field, probably around 10% is where I'm targeting for now. And then Michael Porter Jr., still a little cheap at 6,400. We got this close to right last time around going up against Toronto. Sim model still likes him in this spot. He can be streaky. He can get hot. He did put up 58 points against this team a couple of weeks ago. That does not mean that will happen again, but I still like his upside at 6,400. And so these are all three guys I'm looking to prioritize at relatively low ownership. All right, next up we have the Miami Heat. And for the Heat, they're relatively healthy for what they are these days. Hero and Love are still out. Jimmy Butler's probable, but I'm expecting him to play tonight. All of these guys you can make a case for, but ultimately, none of these guys stood out for me tonight. The matchup against Denver, not one you really want to pick on. They're pretty strong defensively across the board. They're not giving up a lot of fantasy points to really any position. Not a spot I'm looking to attack. You can always take a shot on Jimmy B, but you're not going to find it for me today. Next up, we have a very low game total, 203 Hornets going up against the Grizzlies. The Hornets are favored, which means something, I guess. Both of these teams are really, really bad. Trey Mann is questionable. Once again, if Trey Mann is out, Mishik becomes a much more viable play for me. If Trey Mann plays, I don't have to worry about their guard situation at all, which is the ideal scenario here. I just don't love Mishik at 6,200. I would play it because it makes sense to if Mann is out, but not something I really want to, not a situation I would trust. It would just be a logical decision more than anything. Just because the Memphis Grizzlies are a bad defense, and without Mann, the Hornets don't have a lot of guard options or good/viable guard options. So he would just have even more control of this team. The two guys I do like are, of course, Miles Bridges and Brandon Miller. The matchup is pretty neutral here, maybe slightly below average. The Grizzlies have been pretty good against versatile forwards this season, but these aren't your average forwards. Miller and Bridges, they do a little bit of everything for this team on offense and defense. And so if they're going to be low owned, I want to at least match the field. I might make one of them a leverage play if one starts to stand out a bit more for me later. But here recently, I just liked matching the field on both because they both have slate breaking upside, especially in relatively soft spots. Grant Williams is someone that was standing out a little bit for me in the sim model. Not enough to make him a core player or anything like that, but someone that I just want in the mix of guys in that 5K range. The matchup is pretty solid. Again, Memphis are just a bad team in general. So I'm not overly concerned about the matchup, but the sim model liked him, and I try and keep a good pulse on some of the cheaper guys that the sim model likes. Even if I don't like them myself, I don't know everything. Okay, let's see. Are you adjusting their projections there? Is that why it's green? Well, for this show, it's green because I put a like on them, just to remind me who I like. And then on the pre-lock show, sometimes I'll make actual changes to the projections, and I usually mention that when that happens. But good question. Good question. Yeah. I didn't realize you answered your own question, but yeah, you're good. All right, Tattoo. Have a good one, man. See you later. All right. Now, for everyone's favorite team, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, and no one has any freaking idea who's playing here tonight. The list of TBD, to be determined players on if they're going to play tonight is pretty long. We have Lamar Stevens listed as TBD, Scottie Pippen is TBD, Jaren Jackson Jr. is TBD, Vince Williams, same story, Yuta Watanabe, same story. So once again, it's going to be let's wait and see what Grizzlies decide to play. And depending on that, we might have to play a few of them. Thankfully, they're priced up. So unless that entire list or 3 to 4 of those guys get ruled out, we might be able to get away with not forcing exposure to too many Grizzlies tonight. The most viable and best play from this team would be Jaren Jackson Jr. if he plays tonight, but we don't know that yet. So once again, per usual, NBA DFS, we got to keep a close eye out on the news and see what that starting lineup looks like. But that could be a slate changer. For the Cavs tonight, we have Darius Garland, not on the injury report. Donovan Mitchell is questionable, might be returning. That's pretty big. And then Max Strus, Dean Wade, they're all still out. And then Evan Mobley's been out for a little bit now. So the big thing here is Donovan Mitchell. If Mitchell plays tonight, I don't have much interest in this team. Mitchell will probably be on some sort of limit tonight. Coming off of that knee injury, I'm just not expecting the same explosiveness for a little bit here. So he's not someone I'm looking at 9,200. Jared Allen is always viable for me whenever Mobley's out. He didn't stand out too much for me on the sim model. The matchup going up against the Pelicans is one that I'm never excited to attack. The Pelicans are giving up the 23rd most fantasy points in the league right now. That's not good. That's not a team that you want to attack. We do know the upside can still be there for bigs in tough matchups because of things like triple-double and double-double bonuses, a little bit easier for them. That sounded shady. I don't mean that in a shady way. But long story short, I don't like the Cavs tonight if Mitchell plays. If he doesn't play, if he gets ruled out, I'm going to force exposure to Allen, and I'm going to force exposure to Garland. Levert and Okoro can be added in, so can Niang, as like a little bit of a mix because they get a boost in usage, but my main priority at these price tags would be Allen and Garland. I think the Garland call worked out pretty well last time, but I could be wrong. That could have been bad, so never mind. Ignore that. For the Pelicans tonight, this team has surprisingly been pretty healthy this season so far. I don't like picking on the Cavs too much, and so I'm really just looking at one option here, and it's Brandon Ingram. He stood out the most for me in the sim model. 7,900, he feels priced pretty appropriately. He's also the lowest owned player, projected to be lowest owned player on this team so far. And so the matchup's tough, even for Brandon Ingram, but he's my favorite out of the three. And so I'll at least be around field weight, 5% exposure. Potential, he won't be a leverage play for me tonight, but I wouldn't be mad if I'm over the field on Brandon Ingram. A little surprised about the ownership on Zion. I know he's been good recently, but not the best matchup. But maybe I'm missing something there. I'll look a little bit closer. Larry Nance Jr., a viable 3,600 player, but not someone you should feel safe about. Not the 16% ownership is. Let me look a little bit closer at him. Let me see if I'm missing something here. The 16% ownership was a little surprising to me. Yeah, I mean, I don't really get it. He has been a bit more consistent. He's been seeing 20 minutes back to back in the last two games. Matchup against the Cavs still aren't great. Are we expecting a blowout here? No, not really. Don't really get the Larry Nance exposure. He was showing up a little bit for me in my early runs. I don't want to go above 15%. He's not someone that I'll be above field weight on, but just because he's so cheap, I'm okay getting up to that point, but he's not someone you should feel good and or safe about. All right, last game on the slate, we have the Warriors going up against the Dallas Mavericks. Once again, Curry is still out. I think we'll see him return here soon. Until then, we still have the others all playing and trying to make things work. We saw Tracy Jackson have a much more significant role. He embarrassed my guy, Victor Wembanyama. I got so many DMs of that video. Kind of sick of Tracy right now, but he's very viable at 4,900. I like playing bigs against the Mavs, so he makes a lot of sense to me here. He's a guy that we shouldn't expect to start, but he just sees an increase in minutes. Another guy who, yeah, I like Tracy. Ideally, I'll be around field weight exposure. Injury news and what happens in some of the previous games will dictate how much I force, but I do think he's someone with the kind of upside I do want to make sure I have exposure to tonight. Andrew Wiggins is just a little bit too cheap. 5,100. If he was 5,500, he would be a little bit easier. If he was priced the same as Clay at 6,400, I'll be a lot less excited about it. But at 5,100, without Curry, I'm fine eating this chalk. I don't really want to go above 30 or 40% exposure on Wiggins just because of how volatile he can be. But if I do get the 40%, that's still decent leverage on someone like Wiggins. Klay Thompson, I know a lot of people played last time out. I didn't. I don't plan on getting too much exposure to him currently. He's not standing out for me right now, but this is, again, the highest game total on the slate. So I'm not trying to shy away from playing these guys. It's really just that they're not showing up for me naturally. I think they're all priced pretty appropriately. But per my general philosophy, there's also not anyone that's super low owned here where I feel like I'm getting an edge anywhere. All of these guys feel like a risk to me. Outside, I mean, not outside of, but I think Draymond Green at 6,800 at the lowest ownership on this team, going up against a team like Dallas, who I typically like to play bigs against, is someone that I'm looking at forcing some exposure to. The Mavericks are just not a good defensive team. They give up a ton of points to everybody. And so I'm going back and forth still between trying to force exposure to Kuminga, Paul, Clay, or just letting the DS do its thing. And if I do that with the way things are projected right now, these guys won't show up. So I think I'm just going to take a wait and see approach, see if the projections change, see if injury news shifts things to make these guys a little bit more viable, because they are priced a little bit too high, in my opinion. But they're in a really good game environment. So I'll figure it out on the pre-lock show. We'll have a good game plan here. But the two guys I do like are Wiggins and Tracy Jackson. I do feel pretty solid about them. Everyone else I'm a little bit more nervous about. Chris Paul makes decent sense at 6,900 as well. That will make him show up a bit more. We'll have to figure out the rest of it later, though. Good game is just ownership being pretty spread out and a little just a little high. And I feel like everyone's priced appropriately just makes it a hard spot to get different. And for me, I trust the domination station to do a lot of the hard work for me of just putting lines together. And then I focus on where can I get different. And there just weren't too many of those spots for me. Next up, but I do like the Warriors as much as you can like the Warriors without Curry. For the Mavericks today, Brandon Williams is out. That doesn't matter at all. Per usual, for me, it's really just Luka or bust. But outside of the bust part, I do have Daniel Gafford standing out. He stood out in the sim model. Let's see here. He's had some decent games. The matchup against the Warriors, pretty average these days. Not really a team that you can pick on too much, but they're giving up the 13th most points to post bigs, and so that's slightly above average. So between the sim model, the matchup, the game environment, I was comfortable at least matching the field on Daniel Gafford. And then Luka Doncic is Luka. You just play Luka. I'll be at least around field weight. Anthony, what's up? He said, wish me luck, Josiah. Game stacking Brooklyn, Orlando, run it back with Joker and Chris Paul. Am I making a mistake fading Luka for Joker? No, I mean, for me, so will it possibly not work out? Yeah, for sure. That's NBA DFS for you. But for me, I never get mad when people fade the chalky stud for the low owned stud. To me, that's a winning philosophy with guys who have similar upside. I do like Luka more tonight, but everyone does. And so to me, making those small pivots is fine. I do think you're probably getting a little bit too cute, though, because you're already playing a pretty low-owned game in that Brooklyn-Orlando game. Chris Paul is definitely a viable play, but I think you probably should play Luka in a line like that because you're already playing a lot of low-owned players. But to each their own, I think it's fine. I mean, I don't love stacking that game, but you're definitely getting different. So I don't hate that philosophy. You didn't say anything too crazy. Jimison or Lively for center punt play. Ooh. Daniel, man, I didn't look at either of them. So far, I haven't needed to go to either one of them, and I am going to try my best to avoid both. I mean, yeah, I'm just not a fan of either. So, yeah, maybe on the pre-lock show, if I need value, we can talk about that a little bit more, Daniel. But as of right now, I'm not trying to punt at center tonight. Luka for cash at the moment, yes. Luka's a cash play for sure. He's going to be super chalky. Not super. He's going to be the chalky stud on the slate. So, yeah, he's definitely very, very viable for cash plays. Yeah, it's hard to find cheap plays, but when it's this early in the day, I don't overreact to a lack of value just because we're probably going to get some of these Q tags. These guys are probably going to sit a couple of them, and we usually get that value later. Like even when we look at the Grizzlies, that's probably where we're going to get a lot of value tonight. Not a lot, but decent value. Like even with like guys like Contra, uh, like we'll get some value from some of these situations where we have a lot of guys questionable. So I'm not overreacting to the lack of value yet. But as we get closer to lock, if things were to start right now, I would be nervous and I probably would start to look for some more value plays. But it's usually just not worth the time this early in the day because so much changes and value usually opens up. So no shade, Daniel, if that was like, I don't think it's bad for you to look at those punt plays so far. It's just usually not worth the time, at least for me. So anyone, hope you all do well. I hope to see a lot of you on the pre-lock show later today at 5:30 p.m. If you're interested in that, the link is in the description. Promo code is BOB Bob if you want a 10% discount on that. If not, I'll see you all tomorrow. Hope you have a good one. Peace out, guys.